Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Highruler and today's video is talking about the preview event for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. So for anyone who doesn't know, creators and traditional media alike were invited to Warner Brothers either in LA or London to playtest Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League early. These players were able to play both the intro to Chapter 1 as well as Chapter 3, including the Flash boss fight, and they were given about 4 to 5 hours to play the game. Now, a lot of these different creators have had differing opinions and they've covered many different aspects from the story, the gameplay to gear breakdown, and traditional media as well has given a pretty decent breakdown of what to expect with the game. IGN has kind of been that outlier where they honestly didn't like anything about the game, whereas many different outlets and creators have varied opinions, some ranging from I love this game, give it to me now, to some having some mixed feelings on certain aspects of the game. It seems like IGN across the board have just kind of said, we don't like this is not good. And honestly, like, I'm going to run a little bit of defense for IGN here, but you gotta just have to bear with me through this video. I think IGN and traditional media are still good barometers for what to expect from like a normie audience, right? So for example, if you're a player that hangs out in Discords, that talks about it on Twitter, that's very entrenched with the community, I don't think what IGN or GameSpot or any of these traditional media companies says is going to influence you one way or another. I think you're going to look towards creators such like Caboose, Lejeune, Jay Shockblast, any of these other creators that are deep within these communities for more nuanced opinions about the game. Not to say that you can't get nuanced opinions from IGN or GameSpot, but I think a lot of the time, a lot of the players and the employees, I should say, that are being sent out there maybe aren't the greatest at these games. So for example, when I look at a video from Lejeune, right, and Lejeune's talking about certain things about the game, or I look at some of the other creators that are going into the minute details of the gear and how perks work, right? There's a very deeper level of understanding for how these games are going to work versus IGN's, for example, and they're talking about being hit by something off screen when in reality it's Flash sending the bolt of lightning at you, right? There's a different level there. And that's not to say one's good or bad, but I think IGN speaks to a different audience. They speak to the more casual audience. And not to say all their opinions are going to be bad or good because of that, but I think you have to take into account that maybe their content isn't necessarily curated to the hardcore player. I looked at a lot of the IGN stuff myself and I said, okay, like I can see the mindset, right? It's probably someone who's, you know, traditionally going to be called a skill issue player. But like, I think that speaks to a lot of the people that are going to be playing these games. A lot of the time in looters, for example, people will look towards content creators and other people for builds and how to work certain systems. And I think a lot of the time games need to do better at onboarding their players to help out with that. So I think a lot of the issues that could be addressed in the game may actually be addressed in the game. We just don't know it yet, right? So I think when I look at IGN's, for example, I have to look at who's writing it, who's talking about it, what is their experience in these genres? Do they like these genres? You know, like there has to be a mindset, you know, where you dig into these people essentially, because otherwise you may just read the top layer and you don't really get the full picture of these players, right? So for example, as I said, I look at Lejeune, Jay Shockblast, Caboose. There's a deeper level to these guys. So I know that there's a level of care here that they're going to look at these games with, right? So, I mean, it's tough, guys. You know, I look at traditional media nowadays and I wonder who they send to these events. I think obviously you want people who are more familiar with these games to go out there, right? So they have a deeper understanding and not to say appreciation, but respect for what goes into these games. And I think if you do, you're able to get a more nuanced opinion. But I also know that I'm maybe not the target audience for a lot of these things, right? So I don't think as consumers, as players, we should be looking at IGN and burning them at the stake. I think we have to understand that maybe what they're kind of talking about is just a layer higher than we are at, right? And I think if anything, the game and the marketing has to kind of address that sort of stuff, right? So for example, you know, if someone buys the game and they go through the onboarding process and then they can't hit the Flash. I mean, yeah, how do you address that, right? Through your onboarding process, through players getting through the game and then coming to their first boss fight. I think in a world where people play Elden Ring and Dark Souls, for example. Do I think Suicide Squad is going to be the backbreaker for a lot of players? No, but I know myself, I wouldn't go into an Elden Ring game expecting it to be easy. I wouldn't go into it because I know that I'm probably not the player that is designed for those type of games, right? So I think players have to be better understanding what games are for them. And I think games have to be better at onboarding players so they can, get comfortable with the mechanics. I think these players were only given 4 to 5 hours. So who's to say they were able to get the onboarding experience that we're going to get when the game officially comes out? And that's really all I have for you guys today. It's just one of those things where I think we have to look at the person who's reviewing and their understanding for these types of games and their enthusiasm for these types of games. If someone's going in there and maybe they're not the most enthusiastic about a looter superhero game, maybe they're not going to be the most excited about it, right? And I think when you look at that IGN one, for example, yeah, you kind of get that feeling, right? Like they were very much so like, I don't want this game. I don't want to kill the Justice League. I don't want to play as the villains. I wanted a Batman game. And I think right there, you kind of get the vibe of what you're going to be reading or watching. So it's one of those things, guys, where do I think we need to be burning IGN at the stake for this? No, it's not like the worst thing they've ever done. Is it disappointing? Sure, but like also understand that maybe that content isn't curated for you. And I think that's the thing we have to take into account. If you're deep into the trenches of this community, you're watching the deeper level content. You're watching people who are more familiar with these systems. And honestly, you just have to hope that the marketing and the onboarding experience for these games supersedes what IGN is saying about the boss fight, for example, and just onboarding those players to enjoy the game. If that's the case, there's really nothing to worry about. And honestly, if you enjoy the game, you enjoy what you've seen, you've played the alpha, you like it, I don't think an IGN article is going to change that. So with that being said, enjoy the rest of your day and night. Take care of yourselves. Later, guys.